Hello guys, welcome back to Between the Ropes TV. It is Monday night, so that means we're live. I've got Ray with me as usual. Ray, how you doing, mate?
I'm sound, mate. I'm sound. How are you?
Oh, not too bad, mate. Not too bad. I've been excited for this one. Last week's one, there wasn't too much to talk about, was there? So it was a bit of a graft. But today we have got loads to go through. Should we get into the Danny Garcia fight?
Yeah, I mean we've been lucky this weekend. We've had quite a lot of action as compared to last weekend when it was mainly all talk. But we've been treated to some decent fight cards past weekend. And yeah, we'll start off with Danny Garcia versus Jose Benavidez Jr. In Brooklyn, New York last weekend. This fight, I couldn't believe how this fight went, to be honest with you. I tipped Jose Benavidez to win that fight, and boy, was I wrong. I thought Jose Benavidez, with his height, physically being a bigger fighter. Don't forget, Jose Benavidez is actually coming up from light welterweight. That's where he started up when he was with Freddie Roach. I thought he'd be the bigger, physically more imposing fighter. Danny Garcia, we know, is a puncher. We know he's a counter puncher. We know he relies on a big left hook, but that's not how this fight played out. I only gave Jose Benavidez 2 rounds in this fight, Josh. Danny Garcia completely outboxed him, and was comfortable doing so. He outboxed him from center ring. He outboxed him from the outside as well. Don't forget, Danny Garcia is only 5'8", stepping up to 11 stone. That's small. Yeah, we know Canelo's had some success and he's gone up at bigger weights and he's around the same height, but Canelo doesn't fight like Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia is very much flat-footed. Like I said, heavy reliant on the left hook. He's quite a slow counter puncher, but he's very economical. We know he can dig. But he worked the body, he worked the head of Jose Benavidez like a beauty. I was expecting Benavidez to read that, get on the outside, use his reach, and then kind of lean in with the right hand, but like keep him at bay with a jab as well. Didn't really need to touch Danny Garcia to the body, could just keep him long at the end of that jab. But no, he was getting out jabbed by Danny Garcia, which I thought was absolutely remarkable. But Danny Garcia, fair play to him. I don't know just how much he can do anything at 154 because there's some real beasts there. There's some real big lads there. But that was a good win, and it was, the interview was really touching as well. If you guys haven't seen the post-fight interview, you need to see that. But comment there from Mickey C. Mickey, how you doing, pal? Evening, lads. Was a good performance by Garcia. Went the way I expected it to. Yeah, credit to you, pat on the back. I know you were saying to me that you thought Danny Garcia would win, and he won in style. I just wasn't expecting that. I didn't think Danny Garcia had that in his arsenal. Like I said, I thought you would rely pretty much on his counter punching. He would go for center of the ring, but you'd be throwing a few feints and looking for Jose Benavidez to lead, but he was doing all the leading and he was doing all the feinting, and he was touching Benavidez to the body and then back to the head and then hitting him with a straight right as well. It was nice to see. But what do you think of it, Josh?
No, I'd agree with everything you said. I do want to point out that, we have our little back and forth around predictions, and I'm so annoyed with everything going on last week. We didn't get to cover a preview for it because then I'd have it on camera. I predicted a Garcia win on points. Ray, as he said, he was backing Benavidez. So we are still counting it, and we're working on something with the predictions because I think at the end of the year, there should be a little forfeit going for the loser.
There's still time yet. There's time.
There's time. I've been on a good run the first half of the year, so no doubt I'll choke, mate, as we get on. But no, I'd agree. I thought it really was a good performance from Garcia. I do think he's going to have his limitations at 154. Michael, I'd love to get what your thoughts are on that because you visibly, Ray, you've talked about his dimensions, but he was visibly the smaller man.
Yeah, he
was. I just think when he goes in with the elite of a talent-rich 154 division, I do think he's going to get found out, if I'm being brutally honest. I just want to get your thoughts, Ray, in the scorecards. Now, for me, I thought 117, 111 was fair. That was how I scored it.
Yeah.
Obviously, one of the judges did. Yeah. One of the other judges had it 116, 112, which, to be fair, I would have, okay, fine, yeah, fair enough. but the one judge had it 114, a draw. Now, I know we've had a few shockers this year, and there's a fair few that stick out in, go back into last year and beyond. But that's a disgusting scorecard, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And don't get me wrong, having been to fights myself, I can understand why you would have a different opinion from somebody sitting closer to the ring and somebody sitting up the stands next to where the gods are, just because of the angle that you're watching the same fight at. But having said that, there are some fights that doesn't matter where you're watching it, even if you're watching it on TV, those fights tend to have the same outcome and the same scores. And that was one of those fights. It was that one-sided for me. Like I said, I couldn't give Benavidez more than 2 rounds. And round 9 either could have went either way. And I basically gave Benavidez 2 in round 9. And everything else I gave to Danny Garcia. I just thought round 9, his aggression was finally having more effect. And in round 2, he was landing more cleaner and harder shots than what Danny Garcia was. So that's kind of where I went for Benavidez in those 2 rounds. But I didn't think the fight was closer than that. I know people like yourself have, like your good self have, and other people have scored it closer. Fair enough, more knowledgeable than people than myself. But in my opinion, I couldn't justify giving it. And so to have it scored as a draw, I'm like, wow, like what were they watching? Were they counting his aggression, not realizing whether it was effective or not, and scoring that? Because, you can come forward and be aggressive coming forward, but if you're getting picked off and your aggression isn't effective, then, you've got to question that. So, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts were going forward in terms of the judges scoring it like that. I mean, it's not good for boxing, or is it, Josh?
No, it's shocking. In a time where, if you think in the same weekend, we've had a Jake Paul, Hassan Rahman Jr. drama happen, but regardless of that, we will probably end up talking about it, but it looks bad on the sport of boxing. Then you get a scorecard like that. It's a bad look. This is a time where, for me, boxing needs to make sure everything's on point, because with this increased level of YouTuber involvement, the sport's obviously going to come under criticism. And then because of that, it needs to make sure everything that is a boxing match, everything needs to be squeaky clean with it. Stuff like this is just, I can only suggest, and I hate to throw allegations around because obviously it doesn't look good, but it's just corrupt. Like you said, 117, 111, there was the odd round that I thought, I'll give that Benavidez. It was a bit 50-50. So, I could have easily accepted something the other way. As I said, I could have accepted a 116, 112. But regardless, Garcia won it comfortably, And then to see a draw, it just reeks of something fishy, doesn't it? It's just not quite right. I mean, Mickey's back. I don't know how he's going to fare against the elites. I think Garcia is better than people give him credit for at times. His size is definitely going to come into it. Yeah, I'd echo it. I just think when he's in with a Castano, a Charlo, there's loads, isn't there? I mean, we'll get onto it, the domestic, as in UK domestic scene, but I think even the likes of a Troy Williamson in 3 or 4 fights time would be giving somebody like Danny Garcia problems with their natural size and work rate. I just can't see how he's gonna, what the old saying, isn't it? A good big un always beats a good little un, and I think that is what he'll find out at 154.
Yeah. It was just levels in terms of skill. Danny Garcia had skill that are probably not that I underestimate it, because when you look at Danny Garcia's resume, I mean, he's only had the 3 defeats, but if you look at his 37 odd wins, and his resume as a whole, it's pretty impressive. I mean, he's fought Eric Morales twice, Amir Khan, Paulie Malignaggi, Kendall Holt, Errol Spence. So So he's got a very, very good resume, and he's been in with some top names, and clearly he's learned from that. But he has been in some fights one-dimensional. Like when he fought Amir Khan, He was pretty much looking for the left hook the whole fight, and that's what got him the win in the end. But in some fights, he's pretty much just been he hasn't shown any more wrinkles in his game apart from counter punching, sort of like on the front foot. So to see him boxing on the back foot was a pleasant surprise, and he did it well. His quality's there in abundance. He is a good fighter.
No, definitely. Should we move this on?
Yeah, of course.
Should we talk a little bit about the Jake Paul Hasim Rahman saga? So I mean,
it's going to have to get dragged out, isn't it?
Well, it is, yeah. And so, in case anyone hasn't seen it, fight was made at £200. Jake Paul normally fights at £190. Last week, Rahman's not been cutting properly, so the commission said it needs to go to £205. Jake Paul agreed to this, which fair play if he did, because as we've seen with any fight, £5 is a lot, or can be a lot, certainly anyway. And then Rahman has weighed in at 215, and they're saying he's just not making the weight properly, so it needs to be moved again. So long story short, the fight is called off. The whole event's cancelled. Now, it's got to be worth mentioning there are some conspiracy theories, as there always is, immediately behind this. Dana White at the UFC event said that they've sold under $1 million worth of tickets, and to host a show and even put the lights on at MSG is $500,000. Which, we do know it's also one of the most famous venues in the world. So, that does make total sense. Hence, it's cancelled because they're just going to lose a lot of money on it. Rahman's also saying, why is he weighing in 3 weeks, 2 weeks, a week before? Which, I mean, I don't know. Where do you stand on this, Ray? Because I'm all for fighters losing weight properly. And, the days of an MMA fighter or a boxer doing 25 pounds in 24 hours as lost and sitting in towels in saunas, that needs to stop because it's not good for your long-term health. But does Rahman have a point? Why is he having to weigh in so frequently?
That's just the way it is. Some governing bodies have check weigh-ins, and that's what it's called, isn't it? It's like a check weigh-ins. Mm-hmm. Some of them have it from 28 days. Some of them have it from like 6 weeks out. Some of them have it in 2 weeks out, and I think that's probably a healthy thing to do, to make sure that the boxers are making the weight safely. So I don't have too much of an issue with that. At the end of the day, you've got to be professional. If you agree to a weight, then you've got to do what you can to safely make that weight. If you can't make that weight, then you put not only the fight in jeopardy, but your health at risk as well. And if Rahman couldn't safely make that weight, then Jake Paul was left with no option but to call the fight off, unless he didn't want to move the fight up to a contracted weight. And to be fair, if he could have made 200, shouldn't have made 205. How did Jake Paul know and be confident that he's going to make 215? So I can see why Jake Paul's done what he's done. Yeah, you're going to get all these conspiracy theories because people like Dana White aren't going to like Jake Paul encroaching into boxing. They just aren't. I'm not a fan of him.
Well, they've had their
I'm not a fan of him because I don't think the argument for bringing him in was that he's bringing in fans. I don't see that because these fans aren't staying with us. They're simply watching Jake Paul. They're not watching the undercard. Yeah, they're not watching the likes of Amanda Serrano, talented fighters on the undercard. They're just watching Jake Paul and switching it off. If Jake Paul was the first fight in the card, they would turn up, watch Jake Paul and leave. That's not good enough for the sport. There has been some positive things, and we could talk about that for another stream, how he's benefited Amanda Serrano's purse, etc. But for me, going back to that, it's an interesting one because where does it leave Jake Paul now? Josh, does it all of a sudden ignite that fight with Tommy Fury potentially in the UK with all the problems he has getting to America?
No, well, I think that's what will end up getting announced. Whether it ends up being back end of the year in the US or UK, who knows? I mean, Michael's back. Jake Paul doesn't want the smoke. Simple as that. There's an interview with Porter weeks ago, and he called this saying Jake would cancel and make the box look unprofessional. I did hear about that. I say there's a few conspiracy theories floating around. I mean, 2 quick points I want to make. One, the WBC. Now, I understand they're one of the most historic organizations sort of in the game, full stop. However, offering Jake Paul a rank that if he wins, he'll get a world ranking for fighting Hasim Rahman. Now, I know he's the son of a legend, and I know that sells, particularly in the States. However, he's 12-1. He's not really fought anyone of any significance. His own dad slagged him off at the press conference, saying that he's not really prepared for this or any of his other fights. It's sort of a hobby for him as opposed to
a lifestyle.
A lifestyle or career. So the WBC need to have a serious word with themselves, because that's just not good enough for me personally. And then secondly, and I did a social media post on it today, if anyone's seen it, Chris Eubank Jr. has offered to step in, saying there's space in his schedule. Now, that's relevant for two things. Obviously, firstly, it provoked Conor Benn into saying, well, I heard you'd lost your pen, so don't worry about fighting Jake, get the contract signed. So that gave us a little bit of an update on that front. But secondly, I'd like to see it, because I want the Jake Paul boxing saga ended, personally. I'm sick to death of it. I respect what he's tried to do, and I respect that he's boxed some ex-UFC people, but they're all washed up at this point from what the MMA community is saying, and I'm by no means not an expert on that. But it needs ending now, because, Amanda Serrano was supposed to fight this weekend. So it's one thing, a Jake Paul circus being cancelled, but Amanda Serrano's career now is being held up by a circus being cancelled. And that's the bit then that gives me a real issue with it.
Yeah.
And I know the size thing, Eubank's currently fighting at 160, but he fought 168 for a while. And again, at super middleweight against, particularly in the George Groves fight, against George Groves had rehydrated. There was a good, I don't know, George Groves looked like he'd got to be in the 180s. So he's used to fighting bigger men. But the actual quality, because Chris Eubank Jr. he's a fighter, he is a boxer. I just think he'd end the Jake Paul show, and I want to see it. I've got to be honest.
Yeah, he would do. But what does it say about Chris Eubank Jr. that he's not getting those fights with Golovkin? He's not even getting a fight with a much smaller Conor Benn. But he's all of a sudden he's jumping up and down about fighting Jake Paul. What does that say about Junior? I mean, his dad wouldn't have taken that fight. His dad would have come out with the same stuff that you're coming out with, straight from the heart, passionate stuff about wanting to fight a proper boxer. So I've got to question what's going on with Junior there. But I'll agree with you, and I'm not just saying that because we're on here, but if Jake Paul is going to continue to do this, at some point he's going to fight a proper boxer. And that's why I like the Tommy Fury fight so much. Not because I like them both, and I don't rate Tommy Fury, but Tommy Fury Tommy Fury is exactly the same as him. Whereas Jake Paul's like a YouTuber, sort of like us sort of thing, but much better at it. He's he's up against Tommy Fury, who's essentially some guy that plucked out of Love Island, really. He's a bit of a model, he's a bit of this. All the talk about him being a boxer, no. His brother is a boxer. His dad's a fighting man. That doesn't make Tommy a boxer. That doesn't make Tommy a fighting man. So that's what made that fight interesting. But other than that, Jake Paul, for me, if he's going to do this, he should be fighting people like him, other YouTubers or other people who have been in like that Aaron Chalmers and those type of crowd. Because if you're going to come in and fight boxers, do it properly. Then fight the likes of and work your way up and fight people like Caleb Trouks and stuff like that, or Vijender Singh or what have you. Fight people like those.
See, for me, I wouldn't mind, and they've got beef. The KSI fight. Now, I'm a bit of a fan of KSI, in fairness, for sort of everything he does. What doesn't that guy do, to be fair to him? But he's also boxed and showed, I don't want to say he's a good boxer, because obviously there was obvious technical flaws that obviously us as sort of serious fans obviously noticed. However, in that field, KSI is pretty good. Jake Paul's pretty good. They don't like each other. There's beef, and it sells. So they're all in it for the paydays. If we're being brutally honest, so that's a fight that I actually wouldn't mind seeing. And it's similar to me as you've just said with Tommy Fury. They're at quite similar levels, similar amounts of experience. So it's a fight that makes sense. I mean, another great point off Michael. So thank you for these comments, mate. The sad thing about it is every boxer wants the Jake fight. His biggest name in boxing at the moment, and a fighter's biggest payday. And yeah, you can't say anything different. And that's heartbreaking. I mean, I've seen Tony Bellew said he'd come out of retirement and iron him or render him unconscious, as he says. Carl Froch has also talked about it. It's just somebody, if by any chance a big name boxer or anybody sees this, please, somebody just end Jake Paul, because I'm sick to death of it now.
Tell us what you really think, pal.
No, I don't want to hold back, mate. It's same as the Frank Warren thing for me. I just be a bit more reserved.
Just got to let it out. I just got to see it as it is. I mean, yeah, it's not having the desired effect on bringing new fans and new eyes into boxing, as we were led to believe. It's not. So you then got to think, okay, let's have a real fight now. But I just can't see that happening. I can just see the very best he'll do is a fight with Tommy Fury. And I think what you'll then do is think, okay, I'm ready for somebody like a Canelo, and keep his mouth going, maybe fight exhibitions and celebrities until he gets a big. He won't want to risk all this gravy train, as I call it, against somebody that can cause him problems. Like there's a YouTuber who was co-presenting on the Sky card, that Vidal, cruiserweight from the UK.
Right,
yeah, Vidal Riley would cause Jake Paul no end of problems. Absolutely battering from pillar to post. But you won't be interested in that fight.
Joel, Philip, great to have you in the chat.
Yes, Joel, mate, you okay?
I mean, you've come in, Joel, there with a heartbreaking but also very accurate point. Guys, there's a few of you in the chat section. Do us a favour and hit that like button. Share with your friends. We want everybody's opinion on this sort of stuff. Let's move on from Jake Paul, Ray, because I was excited about this stream, and in the last few minutes, it's gone downhill rapidly. Should we talk Wasserman boxing? Because that was a great show. Do you want to do your thing?
Say that again, sorry?
Do you want to do your thing and give everyone a breakdown?
Yeah, we'll start with the Eubank fight against Elliot Chavez. That was a bizarre fight. So yeah, that fight, Eubank boxed the guy's ears off. Boxed really, really well. Stayed on the outside, used his jab, used his legs to get out of range, followed his work up with a right hand. Never looked like getting caught. And then there was a point in the fight where the referee had separated them. I forget which round it was now, but the referee had separated them and had said, stop boxing. Now, Elliot Chavez is Mexican, Spanish speaking, doesn't speak a word of English. Now, referees go over the rules in the dressing room, as we know, and most referees at the center of the ring, just before the first bell goes, they'll have a word with the boxers when they're getting the boxers to touch gloves, and they give them some final instructions, as you'll hear the commentator say, we'll listen to the final instructions from the referee. And the referee usually explains about where they want the punches, how high they want the punches, and what classes are like below the belt. And then they'll often explain about, when I shout break, you break. Obviously, there's a difference between break and stop boxing. And if your English is poor, you may understand break, but then you won't understand if somebody's saying stop boxing, stop boxing, stop boxing, because that's in English, a language you don't understand. So if you're punching away at somebody, bearing in mind you get taught as a kid in a boxing gym, you got to protect yourself at all times. Harlem would have appeared to be not defending himself. So what's happened is the referee said stop boxing, and then Chavez has continued to hit Eubank, who wasn't defending himself. Eubanks then took a knee, and then he was allowed up to 5 minutes to recover, which he was entitled to. The referee, pointing enough, the referee didn't disqualify Chavez. He had a word with him, kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt. He arguably could have done. I felt at that point it was a bit harsh. For me, it was a language barrier. He should have said break, and he should have got in between the two fighters. That's my opinion. He didn't. He stood back and he kind of said, stop boxing, stop boxing, stop boxing. You run a risk of something like that happening. You need to be assertive in situations like that.
Mm.
Anyway, a couple of rounds later, well, up until that point, Eubank got his legs back. He had recovered. He took that knee and he started to box his lugs off again. A couple of rounds later, the same thing happens again. Eubank turns around, kind of waves his hands about, saying, "What's happening here?" And the referee's quick to wave off the fight, and he's disqualified. He's disqualified Chavez. So it was a bizarre ending to the fight. People saying he could have had the fight disqualified the first time it happened, but I would have given Chavez the benefit of the doubt, but there was no excuse the second time it happened. It just appeared to be like dirty tricks. But Eubank, most importantly, Eubank was boxing really, really well in that fight. He looked in complete control, and Eubank's improved so much. When I first saw Harlem Eubank, I don't know about you, Josh, but I thought, nah, this kid's just carrying the surname. This kid doesn't look spiteful enough. He doesn't look as though he's got enough power, but he's completely turned it around. He's got real ring IQ. He uses the ring really well. His jab's wonderful. It's nice, it's sharp, it's accurate. He pumps it out a lot. It always lands on a target. It makes people think. It makes people reset. And by the time people are resetting before they throw their own combinations, Eubank's done his work and he's been out of range. He's building to be a really class operator. So I'm really excited and really intrigued to see where he goes next, because he's been built up quite well. And that went straight into the Josh Kelly fight, Josh. It went into the Josh Kelly fight with the Argentine Basilia. Josh Kelly won every round. Won every round. But it wasn't comfortable. It wasn't comfortable to watch. I saw a lot of the idea with Josh Kelly moving up to 154. I wanted to see him box with his style that he has with a lot more energy. I didn't see that. What I'm trying to say is, in previous fights, you see Josh Kelly start explosive. He's really quick, looks really strong, athletic in the first 2 rounds. And by round 3, round 4, he starts to slow down dramatically. And then he holds his feet and he gets hit a lot. So he's doing all this like feinting and all this, all this shimmying and all that. But instead of moving around the ring, he's standing in front of somebody and he gets caught. And that's why I have this feeling with Josh Kelly is he's still fighting like an amateur, because he's effective for 3 rounds. Anything more than that, he's not. And although he won this fight at a canter, this wasn't the best opponent. Yes, I said he's South American and he was a current South American middleweight champion, but he was no real match for Kelly. Kelly was leagues above him, and Kelly really should have got rid of him, but he didn't. And Kelly just still looks a little bit lethargic for me in the mid to late rounds. He likes to fight at his own pace, and Josh, I'm really worried, because when you get a pressure fighter in Josh Kelly who sits on his chest, who makes it uncomfortable for him and makes Josh Kelly work, Josh Kelly ain't going to like that. Josh Kelly ain't going to be working for every second of every minute in a 3-minute round for the full 12. That's just not his style. He likes to fight at his own pace. He likes to go for a walk. He reminds me a little bit of James DeGale, an equally talented fighter, but likes to go for a walk in the middle of a fight, likes to fight at his own pace, ease off, gets a little bit too complacent. You can do that at an amateur because you can point score to build a lead. You can't do that in the pros. You just can't do that. And that's my worry for Josh Kelly going forward. And other than that, the next fight that I managed to get a glimpse of was a Pat McCormack fight against Dimitri Trenel. Dimitri Trenel's got a decent record, He's got a winning record for a journeyman, and he stopped him in the first round. Pat McCormack looks class. It was right hands that did it. He looks fast. He looks explosive. And he looks aggressive. He looks really aggressive. I like McCormack. Like I said, I don't like to judge my prospects up until I've had 10 fights. But, McCormack, he's making me make an exception to my rule, and I don't like making the exceptions, but I like McCormack. There's a lot on him. But yeah, shout out to Ben Marksby. He got a win. Shout out to Jordan Barker Porter. She got stoppage win at Beck Connolly, which is really impressive because Beck Connolly's tough as they come. Shout out to Stephen Jargo Robinson. He got a win there as well. And then your boy from your neck of the woods, Jose Stewart, got a draw.
Yeah, that was disappointing, really, because I mean, there was a bit of spice at the press conference, and I thought Stuart, he looked like he got the bit between his teeth a little bit, but it was a draw. In fairness, it wasn't a bad fight. I wouldn't mind seeing the rematch at all. And then I just want to talk to you though, Ray. Obviously, Steve Robinson. Obviously, we know the deal. He's with Sky and Boxer. He was sort of released to Wasserman for this show. And he beat Phil Williams. And the point is, 39-37. I think we've just found his level. I think that fight for me really was two guys who have, and I don't mean this to sound disrespectful, but limited ability, but they're giving it their all in all, with all due respect.
Yeah.
But I can't see Steve Robinson going sort of any further than he already is myself. I know he's got a bit of name value. I know he's had a push with Sky and Boxer, but I can't see him kicking on. Can you, Ray?
No, neither can I, if I'm being completely honest. And it's just the way it is. I don't think Steve Robinson is going to be in any contention for a British title. Look, he may be picked as a sort of like a voluntary for something, or he may sort of like work his way up to a mandatory position and be picked by the board of control. But I don't see him winning titles. I expected that win to be an emphatic win. I expected him to come out and really show what he was about. Sure, he's really learned, and that was a blip, that defeat. But he just looks as though it's just beyond him at this moment in time, and it's a shame when you see and you read and you hear who he's been sparring with. You think, oh, he'll take all that learning, but then you kind of think, well, is it the football equivalent of somebody like Gateshead Town or Notts County playing somebody like Chelsea, Man City, and Liverpool in pre-season games? It can't do your confidence any good if they're getting hammered and pummeled, every week before the start of the season. What was going on in Steve Robinson's sparring, we don't actually know. But when you look at the performances under the bright lights, he's not been given them.
Not there. No, I'd agree. I mean, we've got some comments. Dom, great to have you on the stream as usual, mate. Thank you for joining us. Michael, Kelly looked sloppy as the fight went on. So Imran's in, he gasses out. I think that's the general consensus. And a massive shout out for me. Two of the probable highlights of the card: Jordan Barker Porter getting that stoppage win over Beck Connolly. Because I know Beck Connolly is a journey woman now, but she's as tough as nails, and her resume, when you look at who she's lost to, her resume is second to none. So that's the thing.
That's the thing. That's the thing. JPB took it to her. She took it to her. She knew she had to put on a performance, and she got. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, no, Mike Williamson in the ring. Yeah, definitely. For those of you that don't know who Mike Williamson is, he used to be a centre back. He used to play for Newcastle United, and he now manages Gateshead. Honestly, you've seen milk turn quicker than this kid. So yeah, I'm chuckling hard at that comment. But getting back to Jordan Barker Porter, she put on a performance. She knew she had to, and I was expecting Steve Robinson to do the same, but he didn't. You see, Jordan Barker Porter can go on from that. She's got that confidence now because she got an emphatic win in front of her home fans. Stephen, is kind of back to the drawing board for him. It looks as though he's probably shot of a lot of confidence. That defeats took a lot out of him. Where for Jordan, it's basically lit that flame. She looks as though she's got the bit in between her teeth, and that's what we like to see. You learn a lot from a fighter by how they bounce back. And for me, he bounced back like Jordan did. Stephen got the win, but he looked really sluggish doing so.
He did. And then Lisa Whiteside also got a clean sheet shutout winner over Jasmine and Nadi. That was a good win, a good comeback for her after a layout. And then the last thing I want to touch on this, you have already said the result, but was Pat McCormack. For anybody who didn't see our preview, I'm biased, but check it out, because even though you know the results, because Ray's passionate about Pat McCormack. If Pat McCormack sees this, he needs to get rid of his team and he needs to take Ray on as his management and promoter, because honestly, and to be fair to Pat, he really did deliver, didn't he?
He is. And it's not just local Northeast bias speaking through. When you look at the work that was done in Berkeley Amateur Club, there was a reason why at one point they had 5, 6 of their members on Team GB. What Graham Rutherford's done a wonderful job there, taking over from Ronnie Raw, the late Ronnie Raw, who's no longer with us. But Graham Rutherford's done a sterling job. You've got the coaches in there, done a class job, and there's still talent coming through. And Pat and Luke McCormack are, for me, the cream of the crop. You still got other boxers from there like Cyrus Patterson, Callum French, Owen Rees, Ben Rees. You got Toward as well coming through. So you've got lots of good talent there. Georgia O'Connor as well, who you will be seeing on Sky shows very, very soon. So there's lots of talent. And like I said, Pat McCormack, it's not just blowing hot air. The substance to his work. I mean, at one point, he was the second best welterweight in the whole world in the amateurs. And you saw just how good he was in the Olympics, and he proved it in the pros.
No, I definitely agree. No, it was a good card. And I think while certain fights didn't deliver in terms of name value, for me, that was one of Wasserman's best yet, to be fair. I know that obviously it's a fledgling company, if you like, and building, but I was impressed with it. We'll get back onto Josh Kelly. And guys, let us know what your thoughts are on this, because we talked about it on last week's live and obviously then in the preview. And Josh Kelly's been ordered to face Troy Williamson. Troy, in fairness, we've had him on the channel. That was a great interview. So check that out, guys, if you haven't. He was there, wasn't he, Ray? In fine form in his Newcastle United shirt. Obviously, Josh Kelly.
Yes, he was there, yeah, because Josh Kelly's a Sunderland boy. Troy Williamson's clearly a Newcastle fan. He had the brand new kit on. Newcastle had played that day, and they won. It was only pre-season friendly that they won. But I like the way Troy went about his business. He was quiet, and he went up to Josh, shook his hand, and said he wants to fight. It doesn't matter where it's at, northeast or northwest or even your way, Josh. It still sells, and it to be fair, it would.
No, 100%.
I can't see how Josh Kelly wins that fight. I can't see how Josh Kelly wins that fight, and I'm not just saying this because of Troy. I just think because of Josh Kelly's style, and you've got somebody who's relentless and physically strong and big and strong like Troy Williamson, who can punch as well. Troy's not going to give him a moment's rest. And if you think about how he struggled against David Avanesian, you've got somebody who's bigger and more powerful than David Avanesian. And Josh is stepping up a weight class and has proven how physically strong he is at that weight class. I think Josh is in a world of trouble, pal. I really do.
No, I totally agree. I mean, just before I make my point, Michael's back. You hear about Channel 5, another broadcasters told Troy they wouldn't interview him unless he took his Newcastle shirt off. I did hear there's a little bit of controversy about that. And Troy, in fairness to him, has put on across his social media that, the shirt and the way he was, it was designed to obviously get people talking and ruffle feathers, which in fairness is exactly what it's done. And I thought it was all a bit bizarre when I heard those sorts of reports because, sometimes boxing gets criticised for there being the pantomime stuff. Yeah, fine, fair enough. But sometimes it gets criticised for being too in build-ups as well. And Troy turning up in a Newcastle shirt, it's inoffensive, really. I know there's the rivalry.
What's wrong with that? The show was in Newcastle. The show was in Newcastle. For me, it's more provocative. Josh Kelly walking around with Sunderland badge and blaze on his back. The show was in Newcastle. If I'd been anybody else wearing a Newcastle top, they wouldn't have said anything. I think at the end of the day, they're trying to build a fight. They were respectful. They weren't swearing. They weren't shouting at each other. They were building a fight. I can't understand why anyone from... Because they interviewed him anyway. They were showing him throughout the fight, saying, there's Troy Williamson. There's Troy Williamson in his Newcastle top. I can't understand it. But
no, I totally agree. I thought, as long as it stays respectful, which it does, there was no pantomime chucking tables or anything that we've seen in the past. So I'm all for it. It's called a fight build, isn't it? It's an entertainment thing. But I agree with you, Ray. I think last week we were sort of hinting at that being a good fight. And I don't want to say 50-50. I think I was probably, I said this to Ray off camera when we were talking, and I was 55-45 for Troy. After the weekend, I think I'm more 70-30, maybe even 80-20 for Troy. I think, after those 3 rounds where Kelly looked really slick, energetic and dangerous, as we've already talked about, I just think Troy then, as we saw in the Cheeseman fight, as we've seen him do, he's relentless. The work rate on the chest. I think he just walked through what Kelly will bring. The move up to 154 certainly as of yet hasn't given us the fruits. As Ray said earlier on this stream, we wanted to see his style with more energy, and it's not given us that. And who knows, he could pull something out the bag. But I just think Troy walks through him and gets a potentially highlight reel knockout, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I think Troy stops him probably late on. I think Josh, like you're saying, I think Josh wins the early rounds. But I think Troy is letting him win the early rounds. I think Troy's setting traps. And he's setting traps and he's using his feet. I don't think he's using many feints. I think he's using his feet. And I think towards the middle of the fight, he'll start to use feints because then Josh will tire quicker. He's already tiring from Troy cutting off the ring. And I think the feints, he'll tire because he's got to then concentrate and that takes it out of you. You saw how quickly Tony Bellew deteriorated when he was up against Alexander Usyk. He was like, I had him up on the cards because he was outboxing him, but actually you start to see him get tired very, very quickly because you start to concentrate and that concentration tires you out. You know, because your footwork, it drains you when you've got to keep moving and you're not used to it. And I think with Josh Kelly, you sort of see that energy will drain out of him, and then when he become a sitting duck, and Troy will take him apart.
No, I totally agree. I mean, it'd be great to get some predictions off you guys in the comment section. We'll move on to Sky while we wait for some of those predictions. Now, for me, the Sky and Boxer are getting better and better, in fairness to them, when we did give them
slowly but surely, in it, Josh.
Definitely, but the build to this, seeing them on the beach, it almost gave, and don't get me wrong, the European title is still prestigious, or European and Commonwealth, but it really gave it that big fight feel, didn't it? With the whole build-up, weighing on the beach, the way that the press conferences were done, it had that big fight feel for me, and the whole card, top to bottom, it was very impressive. I'll zip through some of the results, and then we'll come back to a few. Joe Pickford extended his knockout run. That's now 17 back-to-back stoppages over Rafael King. That was in the third round. Hassan Azim, and we'll talk about him in a little minute, but a laboured win, shall we say, but we'll get back onto it. Caroline Dubois destroyed Happy Dowdy. Really impressed with her. I thought it anyway, but I really feel like Caroline Dubois is going to be the next generation, the next Katie Taylor, if you will. I think she's going to really take it to the next level. Fraser Clark, we'll come back onto him as well, but I was very impressed with his stoppage win over Bracamont, who people may remember had a really entertaining fight with Dave Allen a couple of years back. And then Ben Whittaker, professional debut. We'll talk about him now, actually, and then we'll get onto the main event, Ray. He got a second round stoppage win over Greg O'Neill. Now, there was plenty of showboating. The ring walk was entertaining, shall we say. But he's backed it up, hasn't he?
He has backed it up, and I like the way he got the stoppage with a right hand to the temple. It was Kronk-like. People were making comparisons to Tommy Hearns. For me, there was a little bit with Gerald McClellan with that right hand. And yeah, I like the finish. I'm a fan of his showboating. If he keeps performing like that, fair play. He's clearly got one eye on almost being like a British Ryan Garcia. He's always talking about how good looking he is and how he can draw the fans in. If he can do that, fair play. But he's got to fight. That's the first part. British fans aren't necessarily like American fans. We want to see somebody who can fight, because otherwise he's going to get slaughtered. He really is. But yeah, it was a good debut. I'm not going to say it was an outstanding one, because some of the showboating was a little bit unnecessary. But yeah, it was a good debut. I've been impressed with him when I saw him as an amateur. I really was.
Yeah.
He looked a class act. If you can translate that into the pros, Josh, I think I've got talent on our hands, to be fair.
No, definitely. I mean, he's from Wolverhampton, which is where I'm from. So obviously you've got that sort of natural bias, if you like. And
your accent's better than his, though.
Thanks, mate. God, you say the nicest things. I am a fan of his, but he does need to tone back on the showboating for me. I just think, and don't get me wrong, Floyd Mayweather made a career and a lot of money out of it, but I just think the more he's like that, the more he runs the risk of people aren't watching him to support him. People are watching him to
get beat.
hope he gets knocked out.
Yeah.
And that would be a shame because he's a real talent. And I almost think I understand it more when a less talented fighter showboats to that level because they've got to, they're trying to sort of overcompensate for a potential not lack of skills, but lesser skill set. Ben Whittaker doesn't need to do that. He's got a great team around him with Sugar Hill, one of the best trainers in the world at the moment, in fairness. Obviously, Sky and Box is a massive platform, a massively growing platform as well. So for me, if he tones it back, but activity is going to be key. 25 years old now. I'd like to see him out at least another 2 or 3 times this year. Definitely 2, but potentially 3 if we can get the shows in. There is talk of him being added to the Saudi Arabia bill, Joshua Usyk. 258 have got a slot, and there is whispers that now he's come through his debut unscathed, he might get added to that. So that would be exciting and a big platform for him to be on as well. Let's not forget.
Yeah, that's another big platform for him. In fair play, I mean, it's only in 19 days' time. Not that we're counting or anything, but if he can come through that as well, why can't he not be out in something like October? Obviously, he'll not be on the card in September. And I think that may be a women-only card. He may be out October, November, and then squeeze him out December. For me, I think you're right. 3 fights this year, 3 or 4 next year.
Then we could be looking at titles.
Yeah, and then you can go for the English or what have you. I think they need to do it. With my worry with these prospects is they do what they're kind of doing with Joshua Buatsi, Conor Benn, and the Matchroom were doing it with Josh Kelly before. They obviously got rid of Josh Kelly, but they need to have these prospects do the traditional route, the English, the British, the Commonwealth, the European, and then go through your world titles. That's the way to do it. Not just kind of going, having like 15, 16 fights and having one toughish opponent and then going in for a WBO Intercontinental or WBA Intercontinental just to get a ranking. I like to see it do the proper way. And I think if Ben goes through that, because Carl Froch went through that route and it gave him that experience he needed in those tough, difficult fights. Look at that Jermaine Taylor fight. He didn't panic when he knew he only had 20 seconds left and he pulled it out of the bag. That wasn't by fluke. He knew what he was doing.
No, I agree. I think it's a case of serving your apprenticeship sounds harsh to an Olympic silver medalist, but it's a different game. It's a different style to adapt to the pro game. So I totally agree. I'd like to see him go the traditional route. We'll talk about another Olympian. This time it's a bronze medalist in Fraser Clark. Now, he got a second-round stoppage win over Ariel Bracamonte. We know he's tough from his fight with Dave Allen. In fairness, he's tough and durable. And in fairness, for Fraser Clark, I was pleasantly surprised by this matchup because he's coming back off an injury, obviously with the hand. It's only his second pro fight. Now, I know he's 30, and I've been one of the biggest people calling for it. He needs to be moved at a bit of a rate of knots. But I thought this was a really good second opponent and a really good performance and obviously fantastic result. Do you agree, Ray?
Yeah, I mean Fraser's a good tidy boxer. He can dig a bit. And this was a good fight to take so far in his career. And he didn't waste any time, did he? And I like that about Fraser. He clearly wants to push on. So more performances like that, the better for him.
No, totally agree. And again, now he's back fit. I'd like to see him, whether he could be turned around for a lesser fight on the September the 3rd show with Liam Smith, because that card could use some beefing up, in my opinion, personally. But we'll no doubt get onto that a bit nearer to the time.
Yeah.
Hassan Azim. Now, he did get the win. It was laboured, wasn't it, Ray? He punched himself out early. And it's hard because he's not just in the shadow of Sky's prospects, because obviously they've signed so many, but he's also firmly in the shadow of his brother. And for me, this performance it might sound harsh, but it just did nothing to take him out of anyone's shadow.
Yeah, be interested to see what the guys in the comments think about this performance and whether or not they feel as though we're going to be too harsh on him. I struggle with Hassan Azim after watching that fight. The first round, fantastic. He was explosive, started really quick, took the center of the ring. Felt as though he couldn't miss with any shot. He was catching James Quinn with all kinds of shots, and they were hurtful shots. They were landing. They were having an effect on him. He was clearly winning. I thought at one point it was only going to be a matter of seconds before Quinn went. And what I meant by when he got stopped by a TKO. But almost like in the second round, I thought, oh, is he being a bit more patient? But then I thought, no, he's kind of gassed out here. The third round again, similar. I didn't see him up the ante, didn't see him. I thought, okay, maybe he's took a round off, put the step on it, put the foot on the gas, show what he did in the first round, give him some angles, give him that jab, keep him busy, keep him thinking. I didn't see that. What I did start to see was he started to get hit himself. He started to get hit. And it's similar to what Josh Kelly, at least with Josh Kelly, you can think, well, he can't sustain it for whatever reason, stamina issues. Is it the weight again because he rehydrates to a ridiculous weight? I think he goes up to 170 something, but that's Josh Kelly. But around Hassan Azim, I just think it's down to ability. I just don't think he's as good as his brother. I just don't think he's as talented. I think it's a case of we're looking at a Matthew Hatton and a Ricky Hatton disparity in ability between the two brothers. Don't get me wrong, if Hassan's going to keep winning because they keep finding opponents for him to beat, but it got to a point where Quinn started to mark him up and Quinn started putting on him, and I had it quite closer than what was originally given. So I had it 4-2. Believe it or not, I gave Quinn round 4 and round 5, and if I hadn't give Asim round 6 quite clearly, and obviously it would have been a draw, but that's how close I had it. And it shouldn't have been that close for that early on. And when people say he was a good fighter and how at this stage of his career, he was the type of opponent that he should have really got him out there in that first round. The way he was hitting him in the first round, he should have got him out there.
I mean, Michael's in the comments again. Some great comments tonight, Michael. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
mate.
nice one. Yeah, nice good comments.
Great to have you back from Greece. It may be a case of trying too hard because his brother is stopping people. Could be nerves. We'll give him another fight. I think, we've got I'm not writing him off by any stretch of the imagination, but I just thought that the weekend was a bit of an opportunity for him to make a statement, and he didn't make it. I bang on agree with your scores, Ray. And I'll be honest, I'd possibly go one step further. I'd like to see him rematch him again, because if he's serious about kicking on, as you said, that first round, it should have been all over. So I think he needs to he needs to make that statement. Same as what we talked about, with Campbell Hatton against Sonny Martinez, wasn't it, last year at Spurs?
Yeah.
Although it's very early, take the rematch, make the statement. And I think the same applies here. Although, Azim did win, I think it was just too close, or a lot closer than it should have been. So he needs to do more.
Yeah, he does. And that's a great point that Mickey's mentioned there. And perhaps you could see and think that he was affected by the pressure, perhaps. But when you put on that type of performance in the first round, for me, that becomes a consistency issue if you can't then replicate that in round 2 and round 3. I mean, this was a 6-round fight, and for me, he showed a lot. He was panicking in there. He was panicking, and I didn't like to see that. So hopefully, I mean, he's got a decent corner. Shane McGuigan, he's got a decent corner. So yeah. So he's got the attributes to have that change. And this is what I find strange, because he's such a tall and rangy boxer. He should be keeping people on the outside, but when he was mixing it up when he shouldn't have had to mix it up. So maybe I take your point there about was he trying to please the fans, or trying to have pressure to make his own name and get people talking about him, because where he should have been stepping his foot on the gas, he wasn't. He was taking too many rounds off, and he was relaxing when he shouldn't. Yeah, I do worry for him going forward, though. I really do.
No, I do. More positive, Caroline Dubois. Now, I've been a massive advocate, as of you, of her, Ray. She's a serious talent, and she showed that. Now, don't get me wrong, no one's saying Happy Dowdy is a world beater. We know what she is. However, we've just talked about Hassan Azim not really doing a great job of beating what's in front of you. Caroline Dubois can't be accused of that. Her speed, her shot variety, work rate, everything about her, I'm so impressed with her. And I just think, I really think she's going to be, as Katie Taylor is in the twilight of her career, let's say, I really do think we've got this is the lady that's going to take women's boxing. It's gone to a great level since 2015-16 when you look back. But I think she's the, if it was a relay race, she's taking the baton to the next level. I really think she's that good, Ray. Am I wrong?
No, I don't think you are. I think it was what I call a grade performance. And what I mean by grade was I think she did everything right according to her style. She took the center of the ring. She was strong. She had nice jabs. She builds off the jab really, really well. Just looking at my notes, the only issue I did have with her was she kept her head on the center of her line a lot. Again, I didn't know whether that's because if you look, she's recently come off fighting the very best in the world of amateur boxing, and against a Dowdy, which again you just said we knew what we were getting with her. She probably thought, well, I don't have to move my head as much. It's just this me being picky because the performance was that good. She did really, really well, and that left hand so venomous. Every time it landed, it was hurting. Gowdy just didn't want to be there. Gowdy just didn't want to know. I like the way she uses her right hand as well. She uses a jab, just as a range finder, just to set up those shots coming in off the backhand there. And it worked a treat. She looked dominant and she looked better as the rounds, unlike what we said about Josh Kelly and unlike what we said about Hassan Azim. Caroline Dubois here, we've got a fighter that looks better as the fight goes on. She looked better and better in every round. And, round 2, she was better than round 1. And round 3, by the time she got the TKO, was better than round 2. So great performance.
No, I totally agree. Let's move on to the main event because I have been itching to talk about this.
Yeah, you have.
What a fight this was. Genuinely, for me, certainly in the UK, this is a possible fight of the year contender. I know we've got a few months left and we've had some good fights, but wow. Let's start with Isaac Chamberlain, in fairness. Firstly, I think it was the right result. Scorecards 117, 111 on all three. I agreed with it. I think second half of the fight in particular, Billam-Smith just sort of put his foot on the gas and really came into his own and showed why he's one of the the best conditioned, certainly cruiserweights, but boxers around in the UK at the minute for me. But Isaac Chamberlain, it's now come out. He's one eye was closed up. It's
broken
now
orbital bone, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's now come out. It's a broken orbital bone in the third round. So with that fight where they were going at each other, and to be fair to Chamberlain, a lot was made last week of his natural size not being that of Billam-Smith and him being the smaller man.
Yeah.
But he rocked Billam-Smith and more than once, to be fair to him, and caused Billam-Smith a few problems, and a couple of times looked like he had more than a wobble. Certainly had Billam-Smith in trouble, and to do all of that with a broken orbital bone and vision seriously impaired. Hats off to Isaac Chamberlain, and I do think, and I agree with what I said still on the preview of that fight last week. I think now we've found Chamberlain's level. He's 14-2, but lost to Okoli, lost to Billam-Smith, and should have lost both as well. I would happily sit and watch the rematch with Billam-Smith, but there's not a call for the rematch with Billam-Smith.
Yeah,
I think it's fair to say the right man won, and Billam-Smith's going to want to kick on. But Isaac Chamberlain, I'd pay to watch him fight. Any of that current crop of cruiserweights. I'd still like to see him in with likes of a Jack Massey or even, Jordan Thompson. I know he's on the zone. He's fighting for the IBF European title this weekend. But there's fights out there for Isaac Chamberlain. He'll come back and come again. But Chris Billam-Smith, there's a bit of engagement on our preview and on some social media posts. I think people sort of thinking I was praising him too much and potentially bigging him up a little bit too much. But let's have it right here. You know, back-to-back wins over Tommy McCarthy, deserved point to win the first one, and then obviously the 8th round stoppage in the last one. He's now beat Isaac Chamberlain pretty convincingly. For me now, it's either, and again, we said it last week, it's either Jack Massey for an IBO world title, obviously a slice of that world title picture, or he's in that world championship mix for me. I don't see the point of him fighting Riakporhe until one of them's got a world title, if I'm honest. Do you agree with that, Ray?
Well, I think for me, we want to put that ghost to bed. I don't think the two of them, to be honest, if any of them are closer to a world title, it would be Chris Billam-Smith. I mean, he beat Tommy McCarthy for the European and the Commonwealth, but I kind of see him at that level. I still think it's a big jump, you know, to go from European and Commonwealth to world level. I want to see my type of fighters in with, you know, some of these Polish kids that you got there. These Russian cruiserweights. There's a lot of them like what I call gatekeepers, and let's test them against some of those. I can't see why. I think it's going to depend on where he's going to settle with. Is he going to go back to the zone, or is he going to stay with Sky Boxer? Because there's probably more of a rush with him with Sky Boxer. With the zone, you know, Eddie Hearn's probably let him go to this because they can't see him getting that type of money, because they probably have that plan, which is to take the time with him and don't rush him. When you get the world level, you want to stay there. I just don't think he's ready yet. But I kind of agree that fight will make more financial sense if it was for a world title at stake, or if it was for a unification. I just think it leaves the loser with not much wiggle room to go anywhere.
See, I'm going to be honest with Billam-Smith. You know, Eddie Hearn, Matchroom, DAZN, and Sky Sports, obviously previously, they've put a lot of time, energy, resources into growing Billam-Smith, to be fair to them. And I think they did an excellent job with him. Like you say, you know, he's not been rushed. It was a patient build, but it was a good build. And, you know, now he's done this one fight with Sky and Boxer, beat Isaac Chamberlain in a great fight. So his stock's never been higher personally for me. He's definitely on the build. I'd like to see him go back to DAZN. I think certainly in the UK, Billam-Smith's possibly a headline act now, depending on where you go. It'd have to obviously be down south in terms of ticket sales and whatnot. But I'd like to see him go back there. I mean, in terms of what Sky and Boxer can offer him, Dean Lonergan was there, who obviously promotes J.R. Pataya, who's obviously just recently beaten Bradis, but will be out for a stretch with his jaw. Now, for me, Sky probably not owe it to Riakporhe, but if they've got an opportunity to get Opataya over to the UK to fight a cruiserweight they've got, it would be a bit poor form for me to not give it Riakporhe, unless they, you know, to just use it as a bait to try and get Billam-Smith to sign a multi-fight deal. I think that'd be a bit harsh. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think they should give it to Riakporhe, and then Chris Billam-Smith can fight the winner as a first defense. But obviously, we all know how the politics of boxing can work out. But going back to Chris Billam-Smith's resume, it's looking decent for him, and it does open doors for him. But there were some parts in that fight. I mean, I know you scored at 117, 113. I scored at 116, 112. There was some parts in the fight. I know when I was speaking to Imran about it, he could see part of the fight where he had Isaac Chamberlain winning. I didn't, but I still thought there was parts where Isaac Chamberlain out of the two looked the far better and accomplished boxer. And that's why I want to see more improvement with Chris Billam-Smith, because we know he's fit, we know he's well conditioned, we know how strong he is, and we know he can dig. But he doesn't seem to cope well with people that box. I know he got the Tommy McCarthy late, but he still has space where he's losing the rounds, and he's losing them quite convincingly. And I just think at world level, that's going to get found out. So I just want to see him step up those opponents a bit more to see how he learns and how he deals with that. Because this was this wasn't an easy fight for him. And if he wants to be successful at world level, then he should be dominating someone like Isaac Chamberlain, pretty much like Lorenzo Coley did. Don't get me wrong, this fight was a much better fight than that, but styles make fights. Going back to that point, Chris Billam-Smith should have been doing a number on someone like Isaac Chamberlain, who's a good fighter. Respect him. He's a good fighter. Was a great amateur, but I just don't think he's big enough and imposing enough at cruiserweight.
No, I do hear your points. I'm a big Billam-Smith fan, so it's hard not to, I'll be honest, for me to not sort of big him up. But I do hear you. I think, if he stays with Sky and Boxer, I think it's only fair Riakporhe gets the offer tie of, for the IBF. And then there are still fights to be made, as you said, Glavaki, Jazuski. There's various, Eastern European cruiserweights about that are gatekeepers to that elite, which Billam-Smith, I think, let's not change tactics. He's had a good, solid, slow build. He's got another couple in him. He could fight again this year, certainly. 3 fights a year at that sort of levels. Obviously, that's about as active as anybody gets nowadays. Should we wrap it up there, Ray? Have you got anything else you want to add?
No. I think that's we've pretty much covered it all for this weekend.
There we go. Guys, thanks ever so much for joining us. We are live every Monday about 8:45, so keep an eye out on that. Keep an eye on all of our social medias. We've got lots of great content coming for you this week, including one very, very special interview that we've got. So keep an eye out and, join us on the next one.